Hey guys! Tonight, we journey into the thick jungles and misty mountains of the Americas, not the ones with highways and honking horns, but the ones that echo with lost voices, buried bricks and legends whispered through the vines. You're standing at the edge of history, where Spanish conquistadors once marched with greedy eyes and aching feet, dreaming not of a new world, but of golden cities gleaming just out of reach. You've probably heard of El Dorado, but trust me, you wouldn't have survived 5 minutes on those expeditions between the mosquitoes, mysterious fevers, and treacherous rivers. You'd be napping face down in mud before you even saw a single nugget of gold. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and what time it is where you're watching. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing near the Caribbean coast in the early 1500s. All around you, the humid air buzzes with insects and tension. Spanish scouts wrapped in too many layers of armor for this heat mutter and frustration. They're hunting cities of gold, chasing rumors more than maps. One name keeps surfacing: the 7 cities of Cibola. Some say they shimmer with gilded temples. Others insist they're protected by walls of light. No one knows where they are, but that doesn't stop them. Driven by desperation and daydreams, the Spanish keep marching west. Historians still argue whether the myth originated from Moorish tales, indigenous exaggerations, or colonial imagination. What's certain is that the Spanish took it seriously. Letters from the time mention burning suns, bottomless rivers, and natives pointing westward with vague gestures, either confused or stalling. Meanwhile, back in Europe, these stories are plastered across maps. Sea serpents curl beside imagined lands. One quirky fact: some of these maps showed California as an island, because why not? Fast forward a bit. Fray Marcos de Niza claims he glimpsed a golden city from a distance shimmering in the sun. His report ignites Coronado's expedition, one of the costliest disappointments in colonial history. You march with him now, across plains filled with prairie dogs and thunderclouds. Instead of gold, you find modest pueblos made of sun-dried mud. They're beautiful in their own way, multi-storied, communal, connected by ladders and hidden alleys. But they are not Cibola. Still, the dream persists. Every vague lead sparks new expeditions deeper into forests, higher into mountains. You're chasing ghosts painted with gold leaf. There's a reason this obsession never really ends. Humans love the idea of lost perfection. It's why Atlantis never goes out of style. Why even today, adventurers with GoPros retrace those footsteps, hoping to find some undiscovered clue. And here's the twist: real golden cities did exist. Not dripping with literal gold, but shimmering with vibrant life trade art and architecture, places like Cahokia, Tenochtitlan, and Tiwanaku. But because their shine didn't fit Spanish fantasy, they were dismissed or destroyed. Tonight, we'll walk through them, quietly, reverently, one step at a time. You're trudging north now, your boots squelching in the soft river-bottom soil of the Mississippi floodplain. The year is around 1100 CE, and the city ahead of you, Cahokia, is alive with movement, sound, and a strange sort of symmetry. It rises like a dream from the flat earth, dominated by a massive mound that dwarfs every other structure in sight. This is Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas. You climb its compacted layers of soil basket by basket, built by hand. From the top, the view is astonishing neat neighborhoods, wooden palisades, and an immense central plaza bustling with people in dyed tunics. Traders unloading shells, and copper kids darting between post holes. Historians still argue whether Cahokia had a ruling elite or a more distributed form of governance. What's certain is that this city had real planning. Woodhenge-like timber circles track the solstices, while roads align with celestial patterns. You think of Paris, London. This place would have rivaled them in size at the time. A quirky detail, you wouldn't expect Cahokians practiced cranial shaping. Elite infants' skulls were gently bound to achieve elongated shapes. Stylish, intimidating, or both, hard to say. Then there's the trash pits. Archaeologists love these. You peer in and find layers of deer bones, broken pots, fish scales. One area suggests massive feasting events, perhaps for rituals or political alliances. Another site shows evidence of human sacrifice. You shiver. Not everything lost was lovely. Still, there's a rhythm here. Farmers bring in maize from the surrounding fields. Canoes glide along the Mississippi. The air smells of smoke mud and sweet corn cakes. You sit at the mound's summit, watching the sun set over a metropolis few today even know existed. And it strikes you, this wasn't some primitive culture. This was a city, a civilization, just one whose memory was buried beneath centuries of indifference and plow blades. You're gliding now, literally, through the floating gardens and narrow canals of Tenochtitlan. It's the early 1500s, and you're in the heart of the Aztec world, drifting on a flat-bottomed canoe, as if Venice and a botanical paradise had a child. The city unfurls before you. Like a woven tapestry, whitewashed temples, red-painted, shrines bustling, markets echoing with Nahuatl shouts. Built atop Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan is an architectural marvel. Long causeways connect it to the mainland, with retractable bridges designed to isolate the city when threatened. You paddle past Chinampas man-made islands, blooming with squash beans and marigolds. A man in a reed hat waves from a floating tomato patch. Historians still argue how the Aztecs managed water flow so precisely. They had aqueducts, dikes, and floodgates engineered with such foresight that it makes your shower faucet feel like sorcery. One quirky tidbit: the city's sanitation system was ahead of its time. Public latrines, street sweepers, and yes, urine collection for tanning leather. Every part of life had a purpose, even waste. At the city's core rises the Templo Mayor, a twin pyramid complex that looms over everything. You climb its steep steps cautiously. Each level is painted in bright reds and blues, symbolizing war and rain. Priests with obsidian knives chant from the summit. It's intense. You're not here for that ceremony. Instead, you slip into the tianguis, the marketplace. It buzzes with traders hawking cacao beans used as currency-woven textiles, jade jewelry, and baskets of axolotls. Yes, those smiling little salamanders. The aroma of roasted maize, honeyed tamales, and grilled grasshoppers dances in the air. You bargain for a feathered cloak, you lose. But no matter, this city is rich not in gold, but in texture, movement, and soul. And yet it will be gone in just a few years. Not buried by time, but drowned in conquest. The air thins as you ascend into the Andes, your breath turning to mist and your feet crunching over frost-stiffened grass. You've arrived at Tiwanaku, perched high near Lake Titicaca, Bolivia, and built over 1,000 years before the Inca. There's no jungle here, just a wide plateau under an endless sky with stone ruins that feel like they were etched by giants. You approach the Gate of the Sun, a single block of andesite carved with celestial figures. It stands alone in the landscape like a riddle left mid-sentence. Historians still argue what it meant, calendar mythological gateway or throne backdrop. No one agrees. The precision of the stonework is uncanny. Stones interlock with such tightness you couldn't slide a feather between them. One quirky fact, the Tiwanaku used bronze clamps to hold stones together, suggesting metallurgy more advanced than their contemporaries. And yet, there are no written records, just scattered symbols and weathered faces that peer out from the past. You wander through the sunken courts and monolithic statues. Some have elongated heads and wide square eyes, otherworldly and serene. One stares blankly with hands holding ceremonial goblets. It's oddly calming. You sit beside him. Despite its elevation, Tiwanaku thrived as a trade hub. Pottery shards reveal connections with coastal and jungle cultures. They traded dried llama meat, hallucinogenic snuff, and colorful textiles. You sip chicha beer and feel lightheaded not just from altitude. Then comes the wind rising suddenly across the Altiplano. It howls through stone corridors and rustles the ichu grass. A local shepherd ambles by with his alpacas, oblivious to the ancient ghosts underfoot. The city was abandoned long before the Spanish arrived. Why? Climate change, political collapse. Historians still debate, but as the sun dips below the lake's silver edge, you realize Tiwanaku isn't lost. It's simply waiting like its gate for someone to ask the right question. You're deep in the Petén Basin now, somewhere in the tangled jungles of northern Guatemala. The heat is oppressive, and each step forward squelches with wet leaves and unseen things. You've heard whispers of El Mirador, the lookout, an ancient Maya city so overgrown that satellites had to find it first. Welcome to the rainforest's best-kept secret. Suddenly, the trees thin out, and before you looms a mountain, not natural, but built. This is La Danta, one of the largest pyramids by volume in the world. Covered in vines and shadow, it looks less like a monument and more like something the jungle is trying to forget. You brush away moss to reveal crumbling steps. Historians still argue why El Mirador was abandoned centuries before other Maya centers thrived. Some blame overharvesting of the jungle for building lime-plastered roads, massive white highways that once crisscrossed this verdant kingdom. You climb slowly, your hand grazing stucco remnants. Higher up, you find jaguar masks carved into the walls, their mouths wide as if yawning. A quirky detail. These massive pyramids might have once been painted bright red. Imagine that an entire city pulsing in crimson amidst the green canopy. As you reach the top, you realize the view is all trees, no towns, no roads, just an unbroken horizon of green. But buried beneath that canopy lies a sprawling network of plazas, ball courts, temples, and reservoirs. Thousands lived here once in houses now devoured by roots and silence. You hear howler monkeys scream in the distance. A parrot blinks from a nearby branch. You sit on the edge, legs dangling, trying to imagine what it looked like in its prime. Torchlight processions, chants echoing a king in a feathered headdress offering incense to the heavens. And then stillness. The jungle retakes everything. Roots pry stone apart, vines choke murals. You're left wondering not just how El Mirador fell, but why it took so long to find again. You're trudging now through the humid, tangled interior of the Amazon basin, guided more by legend than by map. The air is thick, the mosquitoes relentless, and every step feels like a descent into a living maze. You're chasing whispers of Paititi, the fabled lost city of the Inca, said to lie somewhere in this green immensity, glimmering with gold, protected by spirits, and forever just beyond reach. According to centuries-old accounts, Paititi was where the Inca fled with their treasures after the Spanish ransacked Cusco. Some chronicles describe vast stone temples hidden behind waterfalls. Others mention underground rivers and guardians with jaguar masks. Historians still argue whether Paititi was a real sanctuary or just colonial wishful thinking baked in fever and fantasy. What's undeniably quirky is how stubbornly this myth refuses to die. Even NASA's satellites have been used to scan this region, looking for geometric clearings that might betray ancient plazas. Adventurers, monks, and even Nazis have tried to find it. None succeeded. You too are beginning to doubt. Then you spot something odd. A mound that doesn't look quite natural. Beneath the foliage, a staircase. Not grand, but too symmetrical for nature. You crouch down, brushing away damp leaves to reveal stone steps leading into a shallow platform. A toucan stares at you, judging. Nearby, your guide points to a tree with scratches, Inca symbols. Maybe just bored jaguars. Everything feels like a clue or a prank. You rest beneath a kapok tree, sipping warm water and swatting flies. You imagine a priest king standing where you sit now, arms raised to summon rain or blessings, or maybe just relief from the bugs. What makes Paititi compelling isn't whether it existed, but that so many believed it must. The jungle erases footprints quickly, but it also preserves secrets beneath roots and moss. Somewhere beneath you, perhaps stone still waits. Now, you're walking a vast stone avenue under a brooding sky in a city so old the Aztecs called it the place where the gods were born. Welcome to Teotihuacan, ancient, immense, and eerily silent. Located just northeast of modern-day Mexico City, it was once the largest city in the Americas, thriving around 600 CE. Today, it's mostly ruins, but in your mind's eye, it stirs to life. You begin your march down the Avenue of the Dead, a wide ceremonial road flanked by stepped platforms and vast plazas. Ahead, the Pyramid of the Sun rises like a mountain of stone. You ascend its steep stairs, each one uneven enough to make you regret your sandals. From the summit, you see the Pyramid of the Moon, at the far end of the avenue, with the citadel and temple of the feathered serpent nestled off to the side. Historians still argue who built Teotihuacan. Was it the Totonac, the Nahua? Some coalition its people left no written records, but its influence spread wide. Pottery and architectural styles from here show up all over Mesoamerica. You duck into one of the side compounds, likely a noble's residence. Murals of bright birds, jaguars, and abstract gods cover the walls. One depicts a figure spewing water from its hands, interpreted by some as the storm god, others as a fertility figure. A quirky tidbit: many buildings here had colorful frescoes and were possibly red, blue, or ochre in their heyday. As you explore, you realize Teotihuacan was meticulously planned streets at right angles, multifamily dwellings, and even early forms of plumbing. The entire city seems designed to impress both humans and deities. The Avenue of the Dead wasn't a name the builders gave it, that came much later. But walking it now, with dusk settling and shadows lengthening, it feels appropriate. The city may be quiet, but its stones still remember ceremonies, songs, and footsteps like yours. You're ankle deep in the desert sands of northern Peru, now staring in awe at walls made not of stone, but of sun-baked mud. This is Chan Chan, capital of the Chimu civilization, and the largest adobe city the world has ever known. It sprawls across more than 8 square miles, a labyrinth of courtyards, ceremonial halls, and intricate walls etched with fish pelicans and waves. The heat is dry, the sky a blank white. Your footsteps kick up fine dust as you move through a corridor whose walls are patterned with stylized marine motifs, symbols of a people deeply connected to the sea. They didn't just live near the Pacific, they engineered canals and reservoirs to control its offerings. Historians still argue whether Chan Chan had a strict caste system, with each walled sector housing a different social tier. One clue: the number of storage rooms suggesting a centrally controlled economy. You pass a massive granary, its cool interior still faintly smelling of clay and time. A quirky fact: unlike their Inca successors, the Chimu rarely used stone. Instead, they mastered adobe molding massive walls with only water, straw, and earth. Despite its fragility, the structures have survived centuries of earthquakes and colonial neglect. Kind of like a baked sponge with architectural ambitions. You find a throne platform raised slightly above the courtyard floor. You sit, imagining the Chimu ruler, surrounded by servants, priests, and messengers from across the coast. The walls around you pulse with faded elegance. Nearby, you stumble across a small well, its water long gone, but its carved fish still dart along the rim. The silence is total, broken only by the wind and a passing seabird's cry. You close your eyes. Somewhere out there, the Pacific murmurs. Chan Chan once ruled this coast. Now, it waits half-crumbled, half-revered for visitors like you to remember its adobe splendor. You're high above the Oaxaca Valley now, on a flattened hilltop that feels as if it was sliced by some divine hand. This is Monte Albán, the ancient capital of the Zapotecs, and it sits with quiet dignity among the clouds. Built over 2,000 years ago, it commands a panoramic view of the surrounding valleys, an ideal place for watching both enemies and sunsets. You step carefully through stone plazas, sidestepping low walls and partially buried staircases. The layout is angular, yet oddly fluid, with ball courts, temples, and carved monuments guiding your steps like a silent tour guide. At the center lies the Danzantes Gallery, stone slabs etched with strange figures, contorted in dance-like poses. Historians still argue whether these were dancers, captured nobles, or ritual sacrifices. One quirky theory: they might depict people suffering from hallucinogenic trances mid-ritual, their bodies twisted in spiritual ecstasy. You wander into a small tomb with faded murals of jaguars and bats, then climb a stepped pyramid where priests once called down rain and fortune. The wind whistles past your ears, dry, thin, and clean. It smells like baked stone and wild herbs. Monte Albán wasn't just a ceremonial site. It was a lived-in city. Excavations reveal sophisticated homes, workshops, and even early dental work. Yes, really. Some skulls show ornamental jade inlays where molars once sat, a fashionable wince. You sit at the edge of a terrace, legs dangling above a 200-foot drop. The clouds roll in, and for a moment, the whole city vanishes in mist. Then it returns, like memory reloading after a momentary lapse. Though Monte Albán declined before the Spanish arrived, its cultural echo lived on. Zapotec languages are still spoken. Traditional ceremonies still mark the seasons. You're not just visiting a ruin, you're walking a thread that never really broke. You sit cross-legged now on a weathered stone, surrounded by the silence of many ruins. One thought keeps circling. Why did these great cities vanish? Their plazas are empty. Their stairways crack, their temples overtaken by roots or rubble. This is the disappearance debate, a puzzle historians can't quite solve, and you're caught in the middle of it. Start with the Maya. Cities like El Mirador and Tikal once thrived with population densities rivaling modern metropolises. Then, seemingly all at once, they collapsed. Some cite prolonged droughts confirmed by lakebed sediments. Others point to over-farming, deforestation, or warfare spiraling out of control. Historians still argue whether these were slow declines or sudden implosions. 1,000 small decisions that snowballed into silence. In the Andes, Tiwanaku and Wari fell apart long before the Inca rose. Their fall may have been tied to climate changes too, a sudden drought or shifts in seasonal rains that made terrace farming untenable. At Monte Albán, the Zapotec elite seemed to abandon their hilltop willingly, perhaps favoring valley settlements better suited to new trade routes or political shifts. One quirky theory comes from Teotihuacan excavations suggests it might have collapsed after an internal uprising. Charred palaces hint at social unrest. Imagine a moment when commoners stormed elite compounds not out of rage, but out of sheer exhaustion with inequality. And then there are theories that border on the poetic, perhaps sacred calendars simply ended, or celestial omens signaled a divine withdrawal. Maybe cities weren't meant to last, just to bloom, impress, and recede. You look around again. None of these places died with a bang. Their people didn't vanish. They moved, adapted, rebuilt elsewhere. It's the cities, the organized, ceremonial, monumental shells that crumbled, which leads you to wonder, what of our cities? What ruins will we leave behind? And will future wanderers sit like this, pondering our disappearance too? You walk now through a city that's been rewritten, its temples torn down, its names erased, its streets renamed by foreign tongues. This is the aftermath of conquest, where Spanish boots marched over ancient plazas and built churches from the stones of sacred pyramids. You're witnessing the strategic erasure of entire civilizations. Colonial authorities didn't just destroy, they replaced. In Tenochtitlan, Spanish crews dismantled the Templo Mayor stone by stone and used it to build the Mexico City Cathedral. They even reused ceremonial staircases as building foundations. It wasn't just convenient, it was symbolic. By overriding indigenous architecture, the colonizers asserted dominance, not just politically, but cosmologically. Historians still argue whether this was deliberate cultural genocide or simply a ruthless practicality. But from your vantage point, standing atop a cracked ceremonial step, now bearing a Virgin Mary statue, the message seems loud and clear. We are in charge now. A quirky detail. Many early missionaries recorded native customs in obsessive detail, not to preserve them, but to better dismantle them. That's why we know about feathered capes, moon goddesses, and maize festivals, because someone wanted them replaced by saints' incense and mass. You walk into a colonial-era town square and squint. That old government building, likely built atop a palace. That cobblestone road, it traces an ancient causeway's path. The conquest was less about burning cities and more about burying them slowly, neatly, administratively. But the original cities resist erasure in stubborn ways. Local place names preserve older languages. Folk tales smuggle in forbidden gods under new guises. In some churches, you find saints with jaguar claws carved subtly into their robes. The people remembered even if the stones were moved. You take a final look at the plaza. Somewhere underneath, beneath layers of brick and bureaucracy, lies a city that refuses to forget. All it asks is that you remember to look. You're hunched over a worn parchment now, tracing a faded line with your finger. It curves past a crude drawing of mountains, a river, then ends at a cluster of pyramids. It's not a European map, but an indigenous, one-half cosmology, half geography. And it's whispering the locations of cities the world once forgot. Even after their physical forms were erased, these ancient cities lived on in memory. Indigenous oral traditions passed down stories of sky bridges, glowing temples, and cities guarded by spirits or serpents. Historians still argue whether these were literal directions or symbolic metaphors, but the thing is, sometimes they led to actual places. You listen to an elder from a local community speak of a mountain shaped like a sleeping woman. At dawn, her heart glows. Beneath it, he says, lie the buried halls of her people. Archaeologists scoff, but then someone flies a drone overhead. The terrain, suspiciously geometric. One quirky revelation: in the colonial archives, Spanish scribes often recorded local names of places as nonsense syllables. But modern linguists decode them and find clues. Xochicalco doesn't just sound pretty. It means place of the House of Flowers, possibly referencing a specific temple layout. You stumble upon a codex, one of the few surviving pre-Hispanic books. It's folded like an accordion painted on deer hide and filled with glyphs. Each panel seems to map not just land, but ritual time trade routes and spiritual obligations. It's not a map you read, it's one you interpret. Many such documents were burned, but some survived by being hidden or passed as Christian allegories. A few bizarrely ended up in European libraries, forgotten until 20th century scholars dug them out. You close the parchment and look up. The forest around you is quiet. Somewhere out there, beneath root and river stone, cities still sleep. But in the minds of their descendants, they never left. Now, you're gliding not on foot or by canoe, but virtually through a LiDAR scan of the rainforest. The screen before you reveals a network of geometric shapes, straight lines, platforms, concentric plazas. What looked like untouched wilderness a moment ago is now revealed as a massive city hidden under centuries of foliage. Welcome to the age of rediscovery. LiDAR, short for light detection and ranging, uses laser pulses to pierce dense vegetation and map the ground beneath. It's transformed archaeology in the Americas. Entire Maya cities have been discovered without even lifting a shovel. And it's not just the Maya. This tech has revealed Inca roads, Amazonian settlements, and unknown ruins in Colombia. Historians still argue whether the pre-Columbian Amazon supported large urban populations. For centuries, scholars believed it was too nutrient poor to sustain cities. But recent finds, straight roads, ceremonial mounds, even gridded agricultural zones, are rewriting that narrative. A quirky highlight: in one LiDAR scan, archaeologists found a city layout resembling a cosmic jaguar. Streets and platforms formed its body plazas, aligned with celestial events. It wasn't just urban, it was symbolic architecture, with every structure meaning something. You imagine standing there before deforestation, before GPS. You wouldn't have seen anything, just trees. Now, you're uncovering a metropolis the jungle tried to keep secret. There's something strangely moving about these ghost cities being revealed by dots and data. It's like hearing whispers through static ancient planners, builders, and artists reaching across time through geometry. You scroll through more scans. A lost road stretching 25 kilometers, a series of pyramids shaped like nested shells, a pattern of holes that might have been for planting, or perhaps something else. You lean back. The more we uncover, the clearer it becomes. The Americas weren't empty. They were elaborate, organized, and filled with life. We just forgot how to see. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, not into sleep just yet, but into simulation. Imagine this. It's late evening, and you're strolling through a digitally reconstructed Tenochtitlan. The stars twinkle above Lake Texcoco, and faint torchlight flickers off canal waters. The air smells of maize tamales and wet stone. You're here, but not here. You pass rows of flower-draped altars, listen to the murmur of prayers in Nahuatl, and step aside for a merchant hauling baskets of cacao. In this simulation, the temples still stand, the chinampas bloom, and the causeways stretch out like arms to the shore. Historians still argue about the precise colors and sounds of the city, but virtual reconstructions let us guess with filters, best guesses, and creative humility. From LiDAR data to colonial records, it's like piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with some pieces made of dreams. A quirky joy: some developers sneak in ambient details, frogs croaking in irrigation ditches, a dog barking from a reed-roofed hut, or a priest gently scolding a child for tipping over a basket of amaranth. These touches, though invented, feel real. and they matter. You take a gondola ride through the canals, drifting past murals of hummingbirds and jaguars. Above, the stars align with temple roofs. This isn't fantasy. It's informed imagination guided by science and reverence. You look down at your reflection in the water. It ripples. For a moment, it's your own face staring back. Then it changes perhaps. An Aztec priest, perhaps a weaver, perhaps just someone who once stood where you now stand. Virtual heritage is more than pixels. It's memory made malleable. It lets us reconnect, not just with what was, but what could have been. And as you log off gently, you carry the city with you. Its sounds, its stone, its still breathing soul. You're back where you started now, standing on an ordinary sidewalk in a modern town or city. The hum of traffic, the glow of streetlights, and the distant bark of a dog remind you that it's the 21st century. But beneath your feet, under layers of concrete cable and time, something ancient sleeps. You're in Lima, or Mexico City, or St. Louis. It doesn't matter. Each of these modern places sits atop or beside what was once a great pre-Columbian city. Most people pass by without knowing. A convenience store might sit where a ball court once echoed with rubber thuds. A post office might rest on a sacred mound. A subway tunnel could be burrowing beside the burial place of a long-lost ruler. Historians still argue how to balance preservation with urban life. Do we dig up the past or pave over it? But the answer is often more subtle. Sometimes the past simply coexists, tucked politely into basements and corners of museum lobbies. A quirky example in Mexico City. There's a giant flagpole in the Zocalo. Most people don't notice the Templo Mayor ruins just beside it, what little remains of the heart of Tenochtitlan, now surrounded by ice cream carts and traffic police. You glance down at a cracked piece of pavement. A weed pushes through, and you imagine for a fleeting moment that it's not just a weed, but a memory nature tapping your shoulder, asking you to look down. Remember, because the lost cities of the Americas aren't really lost. They linger in names and bloodlines in the way light hits the stones just so. At sunset, you stand still, letting that idea sink in. Then you walk on slower now, more mindful. Beneath your step, there's more than dirt. There's story. And now, as the last echoes of forgotten cities fade from your ears, you settle deeper into your pillow. Let your breath slow, your limbs grow heavy, and your mind gently drift toward the edges of dream. The jungle has fallen silent. The mountains have exhaled, and the last torchlight in that great stone plaza has flickered out. Feel the warmth of the earth beneath you, holding layers of memory, cities' long-gone footsteps, long-stilled whispers, folded neatly into soil and stone. Somewhere far below, a stairway waits, not to be climbed, but simply to be acknowledged. You do not need to descend. Just know that it's there. The stories we've wandered through tonight weren't just of places. They were of people, mothers, builders, weavers, dancers, astronomers, each with dreams as vivid as yours. Their voices may be gone, but they've left their mark. In stones aligned to the stars, in murals of jaguars and maize, in walls that still stand stubborn and beautiful. So as you drift off, Imagine walking those avenues again, but slower this time. Let the moss stay on the stone. Let the silence speak. And let the wind through the reeds sing you to sleep. Tomorrow, the cities will still be there, some beneath jungle, some beneath pavement, some only in memory. But tonight, they belong to you. But not every lost city left behind temples or pyramids. Some simply sank into the silence, forgotten, hidden, and waiting. And sometimes, the ones who find them aren't even human. Let's leave the dense jungles behind and cross the dry lands of West Africa, where towers of dirt, built by insects, quietly guard the memory of a vanished capital. Tonight, we're heading deep into the heart of West Africa, where the sun beats down on an endless canvas of dusty plains, thorny scrub, and termite mounds rising like forgotten monuments. There are no road signs here, no tourist plaques or tidy museum fences, just earth. Dry, red, stubborn earth. But below that surface lies a secret one the insects knew long before we did, a lost capital city that slipped through the fingers of time. Imagine you're standing there, sweat beating down your neck, the air humming with the quiet tension of heat. You bend down, brush away a clump of ochre sand, and there it is, a shard of pottery, smooth on one side, scorched black on the other. No one put it here recently. It's been waiting patiently, maybe for centuries, maybe for you. But of course, the real credit goes to the termites. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You squint at the landscape, noticing how the termite mounds seem deliberate, like chess pieces, or gravestones, or maybe both. They're not random, you realize. They form faint alignments, hinting at human hands. This isn't just wilderness, it's a ghost map. This region once held the heart of an empire, not the Songhai or Mali ones you may have heard of with their famously golden kings. No, this was subtler, smaller, and nearly erased. A capital city where deals were struck under the baobab trees, where drummers relayed gossip faster than messengers, and where the entire structure marketplaces, palaces, religious compounds was built with sun-baked earth and vanished into it just as easily. Except it turns out not entirely. Something remained, and those termite mounds, they weren't just homes for bugs. They were soil elevators. Centuries ago, these tiny engineers began hauling up deep earth to build their castles. And unknowingly, they brought history with them. Historians still argue whether the capital's real name was the same one passed down in oral tales. Some say it never had a proper name. Others claim it was known briefly and then forbidden to speak aloud, a superstition that stuck. What's certain is that maps didn't show it. Colonial surveys missed it. Even local elders gave it the shrug and sigh treatment. Oh, that place long gone. Yet here you are, dust on your boots, looking down at a cracked potsherd, feeling like maybe, just maybe, you've stepped into the outline of a world that termites kept safe for you. There's something weirdly comforting in that, isn't there? That in a land scorched by time and neglect, a bug no bigger than your pinky preserved the footprints of a city that mattered. You close your eyes, listen to the distant chirp of cicadas, feel the weight of an unseen past pressing gently against your chest. You take a few steps forward, the soil crunching beneath your sandals, and realize how little you truly know about this place. It's not just a patch of earth dotted with termite towers, it's a puzzle without a box. And the more you learn, the stranger the disappearance becomes. There was once a flourishing city here, a capital, not merely a cluster of huts or a trading post, but an organized center of power. Rulers held court here. Scribes marked seasons in the margins of leather scrolls, and processions wound through ceremonial avenues lined with woven banners. But unlike Rome or Beijing, this city left no standing stones or cold marble to whisper its name. It left almost nothing. No tombs grand enough to stop looters. No durable temples to attract pilgrims. No sprawling ruins to tempt backpackers. In fact, it disappeared so effectively that even locals forgot where it had been. Oral tales remained sure, but they spoke of places down by the Red River or past the Whispering Fields, not with GPS precision. For decades, maybe centuries, the capital was considered lost, perhaps even mythical. And then there were the maps, or rather, the maddening absence of them. Colonial officers marching across Africa with their measuring chains and self-importance managed to note everything except the capital. One early 20th century surveyor even commented that the locals speak of a city, but none can show its stones. He marked the region unremarkable. Historians still argue whether this was willful ignorance or just a tragic misread of clues in plain sight. Because here's the trick: this city wasn't built to last in stone. It was built to breathe. Its walls were made from banko mud, mixed with straw, poured into molds, and dried in the sun. Elegant, yes. Strong, temporarily. But over time, vulnerable. One good rainstorm, one season of neglect, and down it went. You kneel beside a collapsed mound, brushing your fingers along the ridged grooves, a faint echo of hands that once sculpted both city walls and ceremonial altars. The termites have been busy, of course. Always are. They don't destroy the past so much as remix it, dragging chunks of royal floors upward and tucking shards of family life into their subterranean vaults. It's hard not to feel the silence here. Not empty silence, but layered, like a quiet room where someone just stopped singing. You remember a line from a griot song you heard once? The king's feet left no trail, but his scent stirred the wind. That's how this capital feels. Intangible, invisible, but not gone. Some archaeologists call it the negative space of empire, the missing imprint of something once too vast to notice. And now, thanks to termites and tenacity, it's starting to reappear. You walk a little further, scanning the horizon. From a distance, the termite mounds begin to resemble monuments, conical, clustered, standing at odd intervals. Some barely knee-high, others towering over you like sentinels. It's as if the earth sprouted chess pieces to mark the memory of something grand. And then you remember the aerial photos, the black and white ones taken by drones and low-flying aircraft. Archaeologists first noticed something odd. The termite mounds weren't randomly scattered. They formed patterns, rows, circles, grids, arrangements too symmetrical to be natural, like ancient blueprints reimagined by insects. Turns out that's exactly what they were. By overlaying these termite mound patterns with old oral maps and soil resistivity scans, researchers uncovered the faintest outline of a vanished city. Marketplaces mapped by clusters of dense, mineral-rich mounds. Residential areas marked by looser, more widely spaced formations. Even ceremonial grounds betrayed themselves by the lack of termites, areas too compacted or sacred to host them. You imagine that moment of realization. A drone flying lazily overhead, its camera capturing swirls of dust and shadows. Then someone squints at the printout, tilts their head and murmurs, "That's not natural." And suddenly, a forgotten capital has a floor plan. Historians still argue whether the insects were drawn to specific construction materials or if human activity simply shaped the soil in ways termites liked. Some say termites are archaeologists in their own right, unwitting curators of human presence. Others think we're just lucky that bugs dig where people lived. Either way, the connection was clear. Termites became our unlikely partners in discovery. You reach out and touch one of the mounds. It's warm, almost humming with life. A colony of thousands beneath your palm, unknowingly guarding secrets of kings and merchants, potters and priests. And the best part, this wasn't a one-off. Across Africa, researchers began re-examining termite fields. Suddenly, they weren't just insect habitats, they were historical breadcrumbs. Nature's filing cabinets buzzing quietly with data. It's a strange feeling realizing that bugs might have better archival instincts than colonial record keepers. But there you have it. The capital wasn't missing. It was just delegated, preserved by towers of chewed wood and dirt, whispered upward one grain at a time. You crouch down and peer into the base of a mound. It's a narrow opening ringed with the tiny scritchings of termite feet like a miniature cathedral carved from mud. The air wafting out smells like sun-warmed soil, damp, mineral-rich, ancient. You're staring into a bug's eye view of history, and it's unexpectedly profound. Termites don't mean to help us. They're not historians, just excellent builders. But in creating their labyrinths, they burrow through layers of time. Pottery fragments, beads, bone slivers, all of it gets pulled upward, pushed aside, repurposed. Sometimes they'll use ceramic chips to reinforce walls. Other times, they simply tunnel past a rusted blade or a melted bead, nudging it toward the surface. Imagine the scenes their tunnels pass through a collapsed granary from 900 years ago filled with carbonized millet, a clay doll from someone's lost childhood, the iron tip of a ceremonial spear. For termites, it's just terrain, but for us, it's an accidental museum. You lean closer, shining a small light into the shaft. Within you catch glimpses of reddish strata layers compacted from centuries of rainfall migration and memory. A glint of something ceramic. You resist the urge to poke. The termites know better than we do how to balance the structure. Historians still debate how often this kind of bioarchaeology yields meaningful finds. Some claim it's more coincidence than pattern, but others swear by it, arguing that termite-disrupted soil samples consistently show higher artifact densities than random digs. In other words, follow the bugs, find the past. The story of this capital city became clearer the deeper they dug. Soil cores from beneath the mounds revealed blackened earth evidence of hearths and kilns. Charcoal flecks pointed to controlled fire, not wild destruction. Clay flecks held the fingerprint ridges of long-dead artisans. And the weirdest part, termites often avoid certain materials. One archaeologist noted that they steered around an ancient grave pit as if sensing the sanctity or the sulfur. The bugs seem to know where not to tread. You sit back on your heels a little dazed. What started as a curious mound in the scrub has opened into an entire worldview. Termites aren't just builders. They're accidental archivists, mud sculpting librarians with an instinct for unearthed secrets. The sun dips lower. Shadows lengthen. You glance around, seeing not just terrain, but testimony. The ground is no longer silent. It murmurs. And the termites, they've been whispering all along. You find a patch of disturbed soil near one of the larger termite mounds marked by tiny irregular heaps, signs of recent activity. The excavation team had been here earlier, gathering core samples with the delicacy usually reserved for brain surgery. You reach down and sift a handful of dirt through your fingers. It's soft, friable, and unexpectedly complex. Bits of charcoal crumbly ceramics and something that gleams faintly iron. This is where it starts to get strange. Termites, in their methodical tunneling, brought up more than just dirt. The mounds revealed traces of a city that had long since disappeared layer by layer. Archaeologists began finding artifacts no one expected: micro shards of painted pottery, rusted nails, even smelted iron beads from blacksmithing workshops. How did the bugs get it all up here? Well, termites build tall to ventilate their colonies. They dredge deep, hauling material upward to keep their nests aerated. And in doing so, they become unwitting archaeologists, hauling the past into the sunlight one grain at a time. One researcher described termite mounds as the world's slowest elevators. And you know what? That's not wrong. Historians still argue whether the earliest artifacts from this site belong to a single dynasty or several overlapping ones. The timelines are fuzzy. Some charcoal samples suggest habitation as early as the 9th century. Others point to a later golden age in the 13th. But what's not debated? The material culture was complex. You examine a clay shard recovered just meters from your feet. It's got a painted swirl, faded indigo, in a looped pattern that suggests decorative use. Not everyday crockery then. This was festival ware. Someone centuries ago drank millet beer from this, maybe during a wedding, maybe a coronation, maybe while griping about the price of cattle. Nearby, a fragment of forged iron, a knife blade perhaps still holds its shape. Rusted, yes, but recognizable. Iron working here wasn't just utility, it was prestige. Blacksmiths in this culture held near magical status, crafting blades, amulets, and even the sacred spikes used in royal enthronements. And every bit of it surfaced, not through human effort, but because the termites couldn't stop renovating. You look again at the mound now with awe. It's a time capsule, a passive delivery system of memory. As the breeze picks up, you realize the irony. Insects, uninterested in history, have become the most dependable storytellers. And all we had to do was learn to listen. You step back and try to imagine it all in place. The mounds as buildings, the gaps as streets, the air alive with voices. A city emerges not in ruins, but rebuilt in your mind. From the patterns left behind, archaeologists have pieced together a rough sketch, a grid-like sprawl of earthen homes, market squares, elevated courtyards, and circular compounds that once echoed with footsteps and firelight. The termites didn't just bring up artifacts, they helped trace the boundaries. Mound clusters often mark walls, places where foot traffic compacted the earth, or where posts left subtle traces in the soil. Paths between mounds sometimes follow old alleyways, still slightly harder packed than the rest. The city, it turns out, was meticulous. Homes were ringed with low hedges, living fences of thornbush and neem, meant to keep goats out and children in. Public spaces had woven canopies and shaded wells. Royal compounds stood on slight elevations visible from all directions. From the termite evidence, you can even detect zones of activity areas rich in ash and charcoal, where cooking was frequent, and others with more on slag where smiths toiled. Historians still debate whether this layout was borrowed from other Sahelian capitals or was wholly unique. Some argue that the capital's symmetry suggests outside influence traders or emissaries bringing design ideas. Others say it reflects the cosmology of the kingdom itself, a sacred geography encoded in the layout, where the king sat at the city's spiritual heart, and each quarter aligned with a ritual function. One termite mound unearthed a cache of ground-up ochre mixed with egg and resin, clearly paint. Wall painting, once thought rare in this culture, now seems likely to have been common. Can you imagine it? A city not of stone, but of color. Earth-toned homes with white and red symbols. Archways outlined in indigo. Courtyards alive with scent, burnt millet goat stew, floral incense, and all of it outlined by dirt castles made by bugs. You pause and look around again. There's no skyline here, no rubble or standing columns, just mounds. But beneath your feet lie the impressions of fences, plazas, doorways, and lives. A capital drawn in negative space, remembered not in stone, but in the habits of insects and the dreams of descendants. Now, picture the rhythm of the day. The sun breaks over the Sahel, casting long shadows from the city's thatched roofs. You stretch and step into the hum of morning. Drummers signal the opening of the market. Smoke rises from cook fires. Women in patterned wraps carry baskets of millet, while boys chase each other between alleyways with sticks turned into imaginary swords. This city wasn't just architecture and artifacts, it lived. It breathed. Every courtyard, every shaded corner, bore the fingerprints of daily rituals. You can almost hear it, the calls of herders leading cattle through the southern gate, the splash of water at the central well, the slow chant of elders blessing the day. The termite patterns pointed toward more than layout. They hinted at use. Hearth remnants, worn floor patches, and concentrations of cooking ash revealed areas where life pulsed most. The northwest quadrant, for instance, showed layers of burned wood and crushed bone, suggesting communal meals, festivals, and maybe even court ceremonies. Historians still debate whether the city had a permanent royal court or a seasonal one that migrated with the rains. Some evidence, mainly termite mound core samples, laced with pollen and perfume residues, suggests a semi-nomadic ritual calendar. The king might have ruled here only during harvest festivals, holding court beneath a sacred fig tree before disappearing again into myth. But while royals came and went, the people stayed. Traders, potters, cattle herders, smiths, they anchored the city. Imagine a woman painting designs on a clay pot. The the same pattern she learned from her grandmother. While beside her, a blacksmith quenches a blade in oil, muttering words meant to bind metal and spirit. There's laughter, too. Kids being scolded for knocking over dye vats, dogs yapping at stray donkeys, a griot tuning his stringed instrument by the gate composing today's news in verse, and always in the background, the termites, quietly reshaping the foundations, blind to the ceremonies above, but ever present. Their towers growing grain by grain, like miniature monuments to the unnoticed parts of life. You sit in the shade of a mound and close your eyes. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear it. The market sounds, the cattle bells, the call to prayer echoing off clay walls. A day in a forgotten capital. Alive again, if only in your mind. As afternoon light filters in golden stripes across the scrub, you wander deeper into what used to be the city's residential sprawl. The termite mounds here are shorter, but denser, more tightly clustered, more telling. Archaeologists mapped these formations and realized they mirrored housing blocks. Whole neighborhoods once stood here, their invisible blueprints preserved by bugs. Step carefully, and you find the remains of domestic life, charcoal clusters from cooking fires, beads fallen through floorboards, and pottery shards so fine you wonder if they were toys or teacups. One excavation revealed a floor made of stamped earth, layered with crushed shell and millet husk. An intentional choice, soft on bare feet, cool under the midday heat. The Trader's Trail cuts through this area, too marked by smoother paths and a slightly richer spread of termite mounds, many of which contain traces of imported material. Cowrie shells not native to the region. Copper beads likely from trans-Saharan caravans. Even one glimmering shard of blue glass that doesn't belong here at all, possibly Venetian, impossibly well-traveled. Historians still argue whether this commercial reach meant political dominance or just clever negotiation. Some suggest the capital sat at the crossroads of rival empires profiting from its neutrality. Others see it as a silent powerhouse, small but strategic, humming with quiet trade. You duck under a phantom lintel where a doorway once stood, visualizing life here centuries ago. A mat rolled back to welcome evening guests. Kids curled beside a brazier, dozing off to the sound of fire and parental chatter. Perhaps this room once housed a woman who sold indigo dye. Her hands always stained her laugh, always loud. Termite trails here sometimes follow the line of what were once walls. In one room, their tunnels pass beneath a hardened clay basin, possibly a foot-washing pool or a dye pit. The bugs don't differentiate between sacred and mundane. They trace structure, habit, memory, unknowingly mapping lives. You step back out onto the trader's path. The light is low now, and the wind stirs whispers through the grass. You pass a ring of stone that might have framed a family well, and a wooden post half swallowed by a mound, the last sign of a fence that kept goats from wandering where they shouldn't. And always just beneath the surface, the termites continue, quietly archiving, quietly curating. The sun has dipped just enough to cast the termite mounds into long golden shadows, and the evening air carries a hush. You're still walking this time toward the Griot Quarter, or what archaeologists think it might have been. Not because of inscriptions or scrolls, but because of the stories. Local guides speak of this part of the city with reverence. That's where the voices lived, one old man said, the ones who remembered everything. Oral historians, griots, who held kingdoms in their songs and whose words kept history from vanishing altogether. You pause beside a cluster of mounds, unusually rich in pigment traces, indigo, ochre, even saffron. Decorative, ceremonial, not practical. These could be clues rooms where griots practiced, where instruments were stored, or where memory itself resided. Historians still argue whether griots of this capital were tied directly to the court or operated independently. Some believe they were hereditary officials. Others say they wandered stitching their songs into marketplaces and marriage feasts. But everyone agrees they were vital. Without them, this city would have disappeared far more completely. You picture a figure seated on a mat kora across their lap, fingers gently plucking strings while children gather close. The song drifts upward, catching on clay walls and swaying roof beams. It tells of a king who spoke in riddles, a queen who trained hawks a day when the river ran red, not with blood, but with silk dye from a festival gone awry. And of course, gossip. Griots were keepers of high drama. Who eloped with whose daughter? Who oversalted the royal porridge? Even termite mounds seemed to favor this area. One was found containing a carved bone pin that might have once held a singer's hair in place. One mound, oddly hollowed inside, held a small, fragmented drum skin. No wood, just the skin dried and cracked. Termites apparently didn't care for the sound of drums. Or perhaps they knew better than to destroy a griot's voice. You glance across the scrub and imagine the layered chatter of stories, myths, stacked on memories, stacked on outright lies, told for laughs. All of it woven into the breath of a city that dared to exist in silence. And thanks to termites and song, it still whispers. The night wind carries a dry, sharp edge, rustling the grasses and stirring dust along your path. You're approaching what remains of the ceremonial heart of the city, though again, remains is generous. There are no standing stones, no grand gateways, just a wide, unusually flat area, marked by a strange absence of mounds. That's what tipped them off in the first place. This area had fewer termite mounds than any other part of the site. At first, it was dismissed as unremarkable. Then someone noticed a patterned termite colonies actively avoided it. The soil here was more compacted, almost baked in layers. Beneath it, lots of ash, charcoal, burnt seed husks, bits of ivory and beads. But nothing chaotic. No collapse. No rubble. Just residue. Historians still debate what caused the city's demise. Many ancient capitals fell to flame enemy raids, civil unrest, or religious purges. But not this one. Here the burn layers show control, not destruction. A signal fire, perhaps. A cleansing rite. Maybe even a final festival. One mound near the edge of this zone gave up a peculiar find, fragments of a polished iron staff twisted but intact. Possibly ceremonial. Possibly wielded by a priest king or an oracle during a ritual. The termites had dragged it just high enough to glint under the soil, like a last nod from the past. You step into the open and feel the eerie weight of this space. It feels untouched, preserved, not through reverence, but neglect, like the city receded from it gently, and nature agreed to keep it intact. The sky above you is streaked with purple. The first stars flicker into view. You imagine the last time this ground was full. People packed, shoulder to shoulder, singing, dancing, throwing millet into the air like confetti. And then, silence. A pause that turned into decades, then centuries. Some say the termites avoided this ground because it was too dense, too dry. Others say they knew not to dig where the sacred smoke had settled. Either way, the effect was the same. This piece of the city remained unbroken quiet and whole. You kneel in the dark, fingers grazing the surface. The ground is smooth, undisturbed, waiting. Night deepens now, and the stars burn clearer above the open plain. Somewhere nearby, a nightjar calls. You feel as though the silence around you is shifting, growing denser, full of echoes. And then you hear it, a melody, not in the air, but in your head. A tune you've never learned, but somehow recognize. The kind sung without words, passed from elder to child. Songs that are also maps. In this part of the Sahel direction isn't always given by points on a compass. It's encoded in rhythm. Many communities sing their way through memory, using lyrics to recall the layout of villages, the names of rivers, the order of ceremonial stops. Historians still argue whether the oral geographies surrounding this lost capital are literal or poetic. One verse mentions the red tree between two termite hills, interpreted as a boundary marker. Another refers to where drums echo off hollow ground, possibly this very plaza. As scholars began matching these lyrics to the termite mound alignments and soil features, something astonishing happened. The song started syncing up with the site. This wasn't just music, it was cartography and code. You remember meeting a griot's grandson once, who recited a chant so old it felt like the soil itself might respond. He said his grandfather used to say, "The termites walk the old road. Follow their hills, and they will lead you home." That line had once seemed metaphorical. Now you're not so sure. The termites, it seems, built their homes in places where memory still hummed. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was something deeper. An echo of energy heat or habit drawing them toward paths once worn smooth by generations. You sit near one mound that seems different, hollow-toned, when tapped, lined with soot. A fire mound, the kind marked in songs. If the chants are accurate, this was a gathering spot, a place of story and judgment. You hum the tune again, and for a moment, the stars above seem to tilt closer. Memory lives in strange places, in bugs and dust, in the breath of songs. And somehow, in this termite-marked field, every one of them is whispering the same name. The wind carries with it the scent of dryness, dusty, brittle foreboding. You pull your shawl a little tighter as you walk beyond the ceremonial center into the city's far edges, where the termite mounds begin to thin. Here, the clues of habitation grow sparse, and the soil loses its compactness. You've stepped into decline. No city lasts forever, and even without invaders or plague time still finds a way to erode power. For this capital, the end came quietly, but not without warning signs. Sediment samples taken from deep under several mounds revealed changes in soil chemistry over time. Increased dust deposits, reduced signs of crop pollen, cracks in the baked clay layers indicating longer, harsher dry seasons. The termites again told the story. Historians still debate the main culprit. Was it climate trade disruption? A political shift? But many agree that drought likely played a decisive role. As the river system shrank and seasonal rains grew more erratic, the agricultural backbone of the city weakened. Grain yields dropped, cattle routes shifted, wells ran dry. You pass one collapsed mound with an unusual mix of artifacts, charred seeds, a child's bracelet, and a half-fired ceramic bowl. Not an elite deposit. This was someone's kitchen. Their final meal, perhaps burned in haste. The bowl cracked from heat or panic, a micro-drama from the broader fade. Some termite mounds from this abandonment belt even show a brief pause in activity, suggesting that as people moved out, even the termites hesitated. Then gradually, they returned. And their new tunnels brought up a different story. Less ash, more dust, more abandonment than activity. Less life, more memory. You imagine the slow exodus. Families packing mats and grain sacks. Donkeys groaning under the weight of cooking pots. The city doesn't fall all at once. It trickles away, house by house, fence by fence, song by song. Even the music changes. Later, verses hint at loss. Where once we danced, now the drum sleep sings one line. Another mourns. The termite builds, but no one watches. And so the capital faded not in fire or fury, but in silence. Tonight, that silence feels sacred. Heavy, yes, but not hopeless. Because as you walk the dry path back toward the still-standing mounds, you know the story isn't gone, just resting. You find yourself standing beneath a solitary acacia, its silhouette etched against the early stars. From here, the land stretches flat and unassuming. To the untrained eye, it looks like nothing, a patch of scrubland barely worth a glance. But not long ago, someone did glance and missed everything. This was the era of maps and mandates, when colonial administrators swept across the Sahel with surveyors' chains and clipboards. They documented what they could see: trade routes, rivers, village clusters. But cities like this one, they were written off. Early records from French outposts described the area as lightly populated or culturally stagnant. One cartographer made a single note: local tribes mention an old capital. No evidence found. A page later, the same man drew a road directly across it. Historians still argue whether this was arrogance, neglect, or just a lack of tools. Perhaps it was all three. Colonial agents weren't trained to read termite mounds or decode oral geographies. They valued bricks and mortar, what they could measure, weigh, claim. What they missed was everything beneath the surface. You flip through a replica of one of those dusty journals. The handwriting is precise, looping, full of self-certainty. The map beside it is infuriating lines drawn confidently through silence. Not one mound noted, not one name remembered, but there were hints. An early missionary wrote of a village elder who refused to step into a particular grove, saying that is where kings sleep. Another colonial official dismissed a griot's story, about a sacred hill shaped like a termite's back. He laughed and moved on. It took nearly a century and satellite imaging for modern researchers to start piecing it together. They began comparing old French maps, oral traditions, and the eerie consistency of termite mound patterns. And suddenly, things aligned. What colonial eyes dismissed data science confirmed. A city wasn't missing. It had just been written over, erased by bureaucracy and drought, and rediscovered by bugs. You look down at the latest GPS overlay bright dots for mounds, light lines for probable roads, and faintly visible beneath it all the skeleton of a capital. You unroll a fresh map, this one alive with digital color. Satellite scans. LiDAR overlays termite distribution models. It's not paper anymore. It's pixels glowing softly in your hands. You sit cross-legged beside a mound, letting the future illuminate the past. Modern archaeology has embraced the skies. Drones buzz like curious birds overhead, and high-resolution satellites now catch subtleties no human eye could. Tiny variations in vegetation, minute rises in the soil, micro patterns of mound clustering all tell a story. And termites, they're still the stars. Researchers created models overlaying termite mound locations with known archaeological sites, and something remarkable happened. The algorithm began predicting new sites. Accurately. Mounds that matched ancient city grids. Mounds that traced old roads. Mounds that circled burial fields. Historians still debate whether this kind of termite-tech synergy is the future of African archaeology, or just one tool among many. But few deny its results. Entire forgotten cities have begun to re-emerge. Villages, capitals, trade centers, all tucked beneath the silent work of insects. Here, at this site, it was a single, odd mound that changed everything. Taller than the rest, built from darker earth. It caught the eye of a drone pilot who flagged it as anomaly. Digging revealed baked brick unlike any found nearby. A corner of a palace. A ceremonial dais. The debate continues. But one thing is clear. Without termites, it would have stayed hidden. And the best part, this city is just the beginning. Across the Sahel, researchers now follow the bugs. Termite trails have led to sunken wells, forgotten markets, and whole city walls lost to time. You gaze across the darkened field, now lit only by the stars and the glow of your digital map. The mounds dot the horizon like punctuation marks, pausing, pointing, reminding. The capital isn't lost anymore. It's being rewritten this time, with bug trails, algorithms, and reverent patience. You brush your hand across the nearest mound. It's warm, alive, and oddly hopeful. History, it turns out, doesn't always need monuments. Sometimes it just needs persistence and a few million six-legged curators. You stand up slowly, brushing dust from your hands, and turn in a slow circle. The termite mounds surround you like statues, guardians of silence, archives of accident. The capital, for so long erased, now feels undeniable. Not because of ruins or relics, but because the tiniest architects never stopped building. You smile at the thought. The city's final caretakers weren't kings or priests or colonial scholars. They were termites. While maps forgot and empires collapsed, these insects carried fragments upward, preserved soil layers like page margins, and accidentally documented a society's shape. In their tireless tunneling, they created a topographical fingerprint, one that technology finally learned to read. Historians still argue whether this partnership was poetic or purely accidental. But at this point, who cares? The result is a rediscovered world, not because of marble or myth, but because a bug carried a pottery shard just high enough for someone to notice. You walk one last loop around the central mound, tracing its curves like reading Braille. This could have been beneath a palace wall, or maybe a council chamber, or perhaps a humble courtyard where a mother once sang while shelling beans. The termites don't discriminate, and so what was forgotten now flickers into focus not as a grand tale of conquest, but as something quieter. A gentle hum of life remembered through soil and insect. A city remembered by accident, then reassembled by care. As you leave the site, the wind shifts behind you. It rushes through the grasses, rustles the mounds, and makes them almost seem to whisper. Not a ghost wail, just a sigh. The exhale of memory. And maybe, just maybe, you're not the last visitor. Others will follow, guided by satellite maps, acoustic echoes, and the hum of termites working late into the night. The capital is no longer lost. Let yourself lie back now. Close your eyes. The termite mounds fade to silhouettes against the night sky. The air is cool, calm, steady. You're no longer walking the Sahel plains, but floating just above them, where memory and myth blend soft at the edges. The city you explored isn't loud. It doesn't rise in stone or echo in ruin. It whispers through clay fragments, through chant and dust, through the accidental architecture of a million tireless insects. There's comfort in that, because if even a forgotten capital can return softly, patiently, without fanfare, then what else might endure, quietly waiting to be seen? Feel the warmth beneath you. Not heat, memory. The earth here holds stories, and so does your body now. Let that awareness settle into your breath. In, out, like termite trails winding beneath your thoughts. There is no rush. The past isn't going anywhere. It's been waiting this long. Let the stars blink overhead like fireflies. Let the mounds shrink away into gentle hills. Let the songs fade into a lullaby of wind and distance. You are still. The night is vast. The city sleeps. And now, so will you. We've uncovered a forgotten capital, not by digging, but by listening to the ground itself. But what about cities that never truly disappeared? Some still sit in plain sight, high atop mountains, silent, unmoving, designed not to be lived in, but to be remembered. Let's climb now to Monte Albán. Tonight, we're hiking up a mountain in the dark, with just the stars for company and the faint echo of distant crickets. You're following a winding path that clings to a high ridge up into the heart of ancient Oaxaca. No lights, no signs, just the rough-hewn stones under your feet, some of them older than the Roman Republic. You reach the summit, and there it is. Monte Albán, silent, deserted, vast. The city sits like a stone crown on this wind-battered mountain with wide plazas, stepped temples, and ceremonial platforms sprawled across the flattened peak. You might expect bustling streets, smoke curling from cook fires, dogs barking laughter trade, but no, there's none of that. Just quiet stone. You probably won't survive this without a light sweater and a healthy respect for eerie silence. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You stand at the edge of the Grand Plaza, staring across a space the size of several football fields. It's empty. No vendors, no crowd, just the occasional buzz of cicadas. You can feel the cool stone radiating underfoot, absorbing moonlight. The layout is unnervingly precise. Every platform stair and angled wall feels calculated. But calculated for what? This wasn't built in a hurry. Monte Albán wasn't always so alone. Founded around 500 BCE by the Zapotec civilization, it flourished for over 1,000 years. And yet, despite being a major capital, it seems, curiously, uninhabited. Historians still argue whether this was truly a city where people lived or a ceremonial stage built more for spectacle than shelter. Your eyes adjust to the silvery darkness. You notice the massive staircases leading to nowhere in particular. There are buildings here, but few rooms, few doorways, and hardly any traces of the messy business of daily life. No broken pots, no kitchen ash. You can almost hear the place holding its breath. Now and then, a breeze stirs a scattering of dry leaves across the stone. Somewhere in the far distance, a lone night bird calls. You feel like you're intruding on a theater that's waiting for its actors to return, though they've been gone for centuries. You imagine the original builders dragging massive stones up these hillsides without beasts of burden or the wheel. You wonder what kind of civilization would go to such trouble for a mountaintop complex this isolated. And then you spot the first carving. Near a temple base, a wide stone is etched with a human figure. But it's not a triumphant warrior or noble, no. This one's upside down, limbs limp, head tilted unnaturally. Some scholars say these are depictions of sacrificial victims. Others think they represent fallen enemies or a symbolic surrender. The truth lost in time. You kneel beside the carving. Tiny flecks of lichen glow in the moonlight, their gentle fuzziness softening the stone's brutality. You brush your fingers over the lines, thinking about the hands that chiseled them 2 millennia ago. Back on your feet, you walk past truncated pyramids, none grand enough to house kings yet monumental all the same. The stars overhead feel unnaturally close, like the whole city was lifted into the sky. It's as if Monte Albán was designed more for the gods than for humans. And yet this place once ruled a vast region. Its people created a calendar, developed writing carved stelae filled with dates and rituals. They weren't primitive, they were precise. And that precision echoes in the geometry of this abandoned city. A curious fact, unlike other Mesoamerican centers like Teotihuacan or Tikal, Monte Albán doesn't sprawl. It's hemmed in, as if it never meant to grow beyond the summit. It's a design desertion, a city built to impress and to be left alone. As the breeze picks up, you pull your shawl tighter. Somewhere behind one of the stepped mounds, you swear you hear footfalls. But of course, it's just the wind bouncing between the stones. You descend one of the great staircases, your sandals scuffing softly against the worn stone. Each step feels too broad for comfort, like it was built for ceremonial processions instead of everyday use. And perhaps it was. The proportions are odd, grand, but not quite human scale. You pause halfway down and glance back up. From this angle, the whole staircase resembles a slope carved out of a hillside, less practical stairwell, more a platform for display. You imagine a line of elaborately dressed priests ascending at dawn, their feathered headdresses catching the first light, or perhaps dancers with obsidian mirrors strapped to their backs, shimmering as they moved. Then again, historians still argue whether the Zapotec used these staircases as theatrical runways or ritual gateways. The truth might be somewhere in between. At the base, the air shifts. You're in another plaza now. Smaller, hemmed in by squat temples and an angular platform shaped like an arrowhead. It points north, not toward any landmark, but aligned with uncanny precision to the cardinal directions. The Zapotec didn't build randomly. You start to realize everything here points somewhere. You tread across flagstones etched by time. Some still bear faint glyphs, Zapotec script perhaps. The language is largely undeciphered, a lost tongue of a people who left no Rosetta Stone behind. You pass a low wall where shadows deepen and find another carving this time, a figure bent in half, a long tongue or serpent emerging from its mouth. Maybe it's a deity, maybe a dream. There's a chill in the wind as it whistles between buildings. You step under a lintel carved with circles and lines, maybe a calendar, maybe something more esoteric. The stairways here seem to fold space, leading you back to places you thought you'd left behind. Nothing's accidental. The layout begins to whisper logic, but not the kind modern city planners would recognize. To your left, a platform known as Building J juts at an odd diagonal. It's the only structure misaligned with the city's grid tilted just so. Some say it was an observatory catching starlight at certain times of year. Others believe it was built to reference a distant conquered city, a silent flex of Zapotec power. Or maybe it's both. Theories pile up like leaves in a corner, rustling quietly, never quite settling. As you cross another staircase, you stub your toe on a small rise. You glance down and smile, a trick of the terrain. These small bumps weren't mistakes. They force you to slow your pace, to look around, to notice. It's as if the city wants to be walked with reverence. Above you, a column casts a long shadow. It's not a structural support, just there, ornamental. You circle it, noticing faint paint remnants, russet indigo, maybe ochre. This wasn't always a stone gray place. Once it blazed with color. You rest on a low bench carved directly into the wall. Across the plaza, another staircase, more monumental than before, rises like a frozen wave. There's no door at the top, just a flat space open to the sky. Why build stairs to nothing? Unless nothing was the point. You sip an imaginary drink. Let's say something pulpy and mildly fermented, and look up. Stars hang heavy. You're standing in architecture that feels more like a thought experiment than a city. Every direction leads to silence. Every path ends in suggestion. A bat flits overhead. You catch the glint of its wings as it vanishes past the moon. Somewhere, someone long ago must have stood exactly here and asked, who is this city really for? Monte Albán isn't trying to be lived in, it's trying to be remembered. You cross into the central plaza again, and it begins to dawn on you this city was never bustling. There are no marketplaces, no homes packed along winding alleys, just wide ceremonial spaces, platforms, and sight lines that pull your gaze toward distant hills or celestial markers. It's hard not to feel like you're on a movie set, minus the cameras. Historians still argue whether Monte Albán functioned as a political capital, religious center, or a symbolic projection of power. Whatever it wasn't built for crowds. You imagine hundreds gathered here. Yes, but for what? A coronation, a seasonal rite, a dramatized retelling of myths under torchlight. And where did they come from? Down below in the valleys, the real living happened. Villages, farms, artisans. Up here, theater. A light breeze pushes you toward the southern end of the plaza, where a set of low steps leads to a raised dais. It's eerily bare, no throne, no altar. Just flat stone and an excellent view of the valley below. You wonder if rulers stood here not to rule, but to be seen. Not to speak, but to embody presence. You run your fingers along the stone edge, smooth, worn, polished not by modern tourists, but centuries of use, or perhaps performance. The city's emptiness wasn't incidental. It was curated. Every platform, every absence seems to have meaning. Across from you is a low building that looks almost residential. Almost. But there are no hearths, no storage niches, no signs of food or fire. Instead, there are walls decorated with abstract motifs, zigzags, spirals, and stylized eyes. A friendlier place might call them wallpaper. Here they feel more like script or prayer. And yet, something playful peeks through the solemnity. A small stone niche contains a carved frog, not majestic, not terrifying, just a frog, mid-hop forever leaping from one dusty century to the next. You continue on approaching a sunken court lined with vertical stones. It might have been a ritual ball court, though it's smaller than others you've seen. The sloped walls suggest the Mesoamerican ball game, a sacred sport, an often metaphor for life-death and celestial cycles. But again, it's tucked away, as if meant to be observed by only a few. You crouch to examine a tiny groove in one of the stones. Could it be a scoring mark? Or just the whim of erosion? Monte Albán is a place of maybe, of half-answers wrapped in full-scale architecture. Overhead clouds drift lazily. The stars blink behind them as if dozing. You follow a narrow corridor between buildings. It turns suddenly and opens into another empty plaza, this one shaped like an eye. Again, that feeling not designed for convenience, but for meaning. And suddenly, you picture the city during its heyday, not crowded, but orchestrated. Processions moving in patterns. Rituals unfolding with cosmic timing. The buildings didn't serve people. People served the space. A strange contrast to most cities, isn't it? Usually, streets evolve around human needs. Here, humans molded themselves to the mountain and to a vision still half hidden beneath its silence. And maybe that's the point. Monte Albán isn't just a city. It's a philosophy in stone. You find yourself meandering again through the central plaza, drawn not by a map. There are none but by instinct, by lines of sight that lead you from one architectural question mark to another. And soon you realize something peculiar. There are no true streets. Not one. No alleys winding between houses. No thoroughfares lined with merchants. No tangled web of paths formed by foot traffic over generations. Just plazas, platforms, and processional routes. You pause, letting this sink in. Modern cities, ancient or not, have arteries, routes of movement, commerce, daily life. Here it's like the heart never had veins. The space is monumental, yes, but sterile, deliberately so. You start to suspect that the Zapotecs wanted to make a statement, and that statement was silence. A historian once joked that Monte Albán was a city with all the drama and none of the plumbing. And there's truth in that. You pass by yet another structure that might have been a temple or a waiting area for ghosts. No pipes, no drainage, no signs of cooking or sleeping or waste, just sacred air and carved stone. It's possible, of course, that the residential zones were further down the slopes beyond the ceremonial core. But even so, there's a deliberate aloofness to this place. It doesn't want to be close to you. It wants you to look to marvel and then to leave. You drift toward a smaller building near the northeast edge. It's partially collapsed, its stone sun-bleached and moss-speckled. Inside, a single niche remains. Within it, a fragment of pottery bearing a stylized jaguar. Not playful, commanding. Its angular teeth grin without warmth. The room is otherwise barren. No furniture, no hearth. Just the echo of your footsteps and the realization that even in its heyday, this might not have been a place anyone lived. You step back out into the open, blinking under the starlight. The lack of domestic evidence becomes its own kind of presence. It's almost eerie, like the city was designed to keep life out, to protect some kind of purity or order. Some archaeologists suggest Monte Albán wasn't a city at all, but a ceremonial compound used seasonally or for major state rituals. Others argue it was populated just in ways we can't yet detect. Still others believe it functioned as a spiritual capital, inhabited only by elites and functionaries like a mountaintop Vatican. You pass a low wall, etched with tiny holes. They could be anchors for banners or musical installations. Or maybe they're nothing. Here, even the gaps feel intentional. A soft noise behind you, just a bird, maybe an owl. You turn half expecting to see movement, but no, just the shadow of a pillar leaning slightly eastward, as if watching you. At the center of the next courtyard, you see a depression in the earth, maybe a cistern, a ritual bath, a celestial marker. No consensus exists. That's the thing about Monte Albán. It tells you just enough to ask questions, then drifts back into its stone silence. You find another staircase, shorter this time, and set between two heavy walls. You ascend slowly. At the top, a viewing platform. But of what? There's no dramatic vista, just a sloping field dotted with scrub. You wonder, was this the point? To face the unremarkable? To watch something intangible pass? You're beginning to sense the city's language. It doesn't shout. It hums. not with answers, but with architecture that insists on being felt more than understood, and somehow, in its refusal to be practical, Monte Albán feels more honest than most modern spaces. It's not pretending to be a home. It's a monument to abstraction. You exhale slowly, the cool air wrapping around your shoulders like a woven cloak. Somewhere below, the valley towns still hum with life. But up here, just stone sky and the shape of thoughts long abandoned. You begin to feel the full weight of the place, not in your feet, which are now pleasantly numb from wandering, but in your mind. Monte Albán doesn't explain itself. It resists narrative. And maybe that's the secret to its power. As you wander past another broad platform, you stop at a display of obsidian shards laid out beneath a transparent shelter. These aren't weapons, not exactly. They're tools. Precision cut, razor sharp. You hold one in your imagination, and it gleams like black ice. These were used to carve stone, yes, but also perhaps to perform rites, to score lines across bark paper books or skin, maybe both. You kneel to look closer. In the glassy surface of one obsidian flake, your face warps wide, then narrow, then gone. You wonder if the ancient artisans saw the same thing and thought of spirits. After all, obsidian was volcanic born of fire, dark as water. A natural mirror, a window into somewhere else. Next to the display, a reproduction shows a priest holding such a blade. The figure's eyes are oversized, owl-like, and his headdress bristles with plumes and fangs. Not intimidating, more surreal. A dream walking. You can't help but wonder who designed all this. We don't have names. No, Zapati, Satek, Vitruvius left scrolls behind. The architects of Monte Albán remain anonymous, but their fingerprints are everywhere. In the way staircases invite a slow climb, in how platforms face each other like silent disputants, in how buildings align not to roads or rivers, but to the sun and stars. You remember Building J, the oddly tilted one. Some researchers say its skewed angle aligns with Capella, a bright star visible during key agricultural months. Others think it's a visual arrow pointing toward rival territories. Or maybe it commemorates a battle, a celestial scoreboard. Again, theories outnumber certainties. You circle a complex known as the North Platform. It's a dense puzzle of walls and steps, almost labyrinthine. At the center is a shallow pit, perhaps a tomb, perhaps a stage. The acoustics here are uncanny. You clap softly, and the echo snaps back faster than expected, as if the city is listening. And suddenly, it makes a strange kind of sense. What if Monte Albán's emptiness is intentional theater? A designed experience. You don't walk it like a resident. You move through it like a performer or a pilgrim. Every stair is a cue. Every wall, a backdrop. Every shadow, a line in an invisible script. The city's architects may have been priests, engineers, magicians, perhaps all three. And the rituals they built weren't just offerings and chants. They were spatial, visual, full-body incantations meant to impress, to awe, to structure power. One oddity that scholars love to debate is the recurring motif of the danzantes, the dancers. These are stone slabs carved with twisted human forms. Some look graceful. Others seem in pain. Many are naked. A few appear to be female. Some are interpreted as captives, others as shamans in trance. You pass a row of them, now their contours softened by time. One figure has eyes closed, arms raised, legs turned in a spiral. It looks like they're floating, not dancing, drifting. You move on past a column embedded in the ground like a sundial and into a corridor flanked by low walls. The breeze picks up again, and for a moment the architecture seems to shiver, not with fear, with memory. You stop, close your eyes, breathe in. This place was designed by minds who knew that stone could sing if you knew how to listen. As you climb the slope toward one of the site's taller temples, the air grows thinner, but the view rewards you. Behind the valley spreads like an old map, fuzzy around the edges, but full of lives long gone. In front of you, geometry, not chaos, not sprawl, just careful, sacred arrangement. You reach the top platform, turn slowly, and notice something peculiar. The main buildings of Monte Albán aren't aligned to the terrain. They're aligned to the cosmos. You trace an imaginary line from temple to platform, and it stretches directly toward the point where the sun rises during the solstice. This is no coincidence. The city's builders were skywatchers, engineers of ritual time. Many structures here are angled just so in tune with the movements of the sun, the moon, and perhaps Venus, that enigmatic planet beloved by Mesoamerican cultures. The Zapotecs had no telescopes, no metal instruments, but they had obsidian horizon markers, patience, and deep belief. They turned a mountaintop into a celestial observatory. One temple in particular, modest by modern standards, casts a perfect shadow alignment on specific days of the year. It's not imposing, but it's exact. Sacred geometry baked into dry stone. Historians still debate how precisely the Zapotec calendar worked. It may have had 260 ritual days and 365 solar ones interwoven in cycles that marked agricultural and religious events. Imagine coordinating rituals, crop planting, and political speeches according to these alignments. Time itself was architecture. You kneel to touch one of the steps. It's smoother than the rest, probably worn by centuries of sandals and bare feet. The space before you, known as the observatory courtyard, by some contains a series of small markers, stone stubs arranged in no pattern you can quite grasp. But someone understood this grid. Perhaps it marked star paths, or constellations, or the invisible comings and goings of gods. In many cultures, city layouts favor function, defense, agriculture, trade. Monte Albán rejects those impulses. It's neither easily accessible nor resource-rich. What it is, though, is aligned, not just with the heavens, but with meaning. You step back and think about cities you've visited, places designed for convenience, wealth, or comfort. This isn't one of them. Monte Albán was designed to impose order. A cosmic order more than a social one. One quirky theory, only half in jest, is that the layout served as a kind of memory palace, a spatial narrative used by priests to recall long oral histories. Walk from this temple to that platform, and you'd remember a myth. Ascend this staircase, and you'd recall a lineage of kings. You look around now with different eyes. That crooked path, a digression in the story. That central axis, the climax, that empty plaza, a moment of silence before a tale resumes. You sit on the edge of a low platform and let the air cool your skin. It smells faintly of dust and mesquite. In the distance, clouds drift slowly, casting shadows that ripple across the valley like the fingers of forgotten gods. And in that moment, you see the city not as abandoned, but as paused. A ritual half complete, a calendar waiting for the next sunrise. The sacred grid isn't just etched into stone, it's embedded in the rhythm of the place. And tonight, you're a quiet participant in its ancient choreography. You make your way toward the city's central pyramid, a broad-stepped platform rising modestly above the plaza. It's not the tallest structure here, nor the most decorated, but it draws your eye partly because it seems to promise something. A secret, a tomb. As you begin the climb, the steps are wider than expected, shallow but numerous. Your legs move in slow rhythm, and you catch your breath every few levels. No railings, no shade, just heat-bleached stone, and the sensation of being watched by ghosts. At the summit, you find nothing. No shrine, no statue, no clear altar, just flat space and the wind. You half expect a hidden chamber beneath your feet. Many pyramids in Mesoamerica conceal royal tombs or caches of ritual offerings. Here, archaeologists excavated and found no burial, no golden hoard, just a few pottery shards and ambiguous walls. Historians still argue whether this pyramid was ever meant to contain anything at all. Instead, it may have served as a kind of ceremonial blank slate, an elevated platform for speeches, dances, or seasonal rituals performed for the benefit of the valley below. Maybe it was the silence itself that mattered. You circle the summit, letting your fingers skim the stone. The edge drops steeply, with no barrier. You imagine a high priest standing here, arms raised, calling down rain or fate. Perhaps the emptiness was part of the ritual, a space not to contain but to elevate. Beneath your feet, the builders left clues, small carvings geometric in nature. One resembles a jagged path, another a celestial eye. You trace them with your boot, uncertain whether they're maps, prayers, or doodles. There's something humbling about a pyramid that holds no bones, no treasure, only sky. It's a kind of architectural humility, rare in ancient cities where grandeur so often shouts. You sit, legs dangling from the edge, and stare out at the hills. The air carries the scent of dry grass and stone. Somewhere, a cicada starts up its endless song. A lizard scurries past your shadow, then vanishes. You think about how other cultures built pyramids to preserve power, to mark tombs, to immortalize rulers. But here, it feels like the pyramid was a stage for living people, actors, not ancestors. A stage that now performs silence better than any orator could. Some fringe theories even suggest that the pyramid was acoustically tuned, that sounds uttered at the summit carried farther than normal, bouncing between the valley's contours. There's no proof, but the idea clings much like the dust to your shoes. As the sun dips lower, the pyramid casts a long shadow across the plaza. It doesn't point to another structure. It points to open ground. Again, you feel the deliberate emptiness. The builders could have added something, anything. A temple, a throne. Instead, they left it bare. A gesture that speaks in absence. You descend slowly, the wind now at your back. Halfway down, you turn to look up again, as if expecting something to appear at the summit now that you've left it. But no, just flat stone, blue sky, and the whisper of design without need. You veer left, drawn by color, a rare thing in the city of dignified gray. A cluster of low walls marks the remnants of a building whose inner chambers still bear murals. Time has weathered them, yes, but their hues cling on like memories that refuse to fade. Saffron yellows, deep indigo, rusty red. You step inside, brushing past a narrow doorway. The space is small, maybe 3 by 4 meters, and the air feels different here, closer, like it remembers voices. The murals run along the upper third of the walls, their subjects half recognizable, half myth. One panel shows a procession, human figures with elongated limbs, bird masks, and outstretched arms. Not a market scene, not farming. Performance. You follow the line of characters like a silent audience member scanning the stage. One holds a torch. Another, what might be a scroll or serpent. You can't be sure. Scholars aren't either. Some say these are gods, others say costumed priests, others think it's theater, a reenactment of cosmology. You rest against the cool stone and imagine being part of such a scene, cloaked in feathers and paint, stepping in time to a drumbeat, eyes locked on the horizon as your body plays a myth. Not just telling stories, but becoming them. That's the thing about this city. It wasn't made to hold food stalls and laundries. It was made for ceremony, for transformation. You weren't here to buy maize. You were here to become the maize god just for a while. As you turn into the next chamber, your breath catches. A mural of a priest dominates the wall. His eyes are owl-like, round, ringed in black. His body is human, but exaggerated long fingers, toes splayed ribs like harp strings. He seems mid-speech or mid-incantation. Around him, spirals bloom. You half expect the stone to vibrate. There's no throne, no bench, just this image. A presence without furniture. You sit on the dusty floor and take it in. The Zapotecs left little writing. What survives is often found in tombs or scratched onto stone stelae. But their art speaks, not in full sentences, but in rhythms. Here the rhythm is theatrical, not practical. You wonder about the artists. Were they specialists? Temple-bound craftspeople, traveling muralists? Did they sketch first, or just begin with brush and hope? The colors derived from natural minerals and plants have outlasted empires, and still they murmur. Outside, a bird chirps. Inside, the silence folds over you like a heavy curtain. Not far from the murals is a room with a strange raised stone slab. It's too low for a bed, too flat for an altar, perhaps a stage, or a seat for a priestess mid-trance. There's a groove carved into the wall, curved like a snake or a river. It begins behind the slab and trails off toward a small square vent. Some archaeologists believe it may have carried incense or smoke. Others think it was symbolic, a visual path for spirits. Whatever the case, it's not something you'd find in a house. This isn't residential. It's experiential. You step back into the sunlight, blinking. The murals stick with you. Not just their colors, but their mood. They don't teach. They invite. And Monte Albán, for all its quiet, was once loud with stories enacted in feathers and fire. The city may have lacked marketplaces, but it was rich in narrative, not told in books or records, but in painted walls, shadowy corridors, in the curve of every ceremonial path. As you continue walking, you find yourself thinking less about daily life and more about performance, about how a society might pour its energy not into comfort, but into spectacle, not into homes, but into myths made visible. And somehow, it feels restful. Like even now, the city is waiting for its next performance. You smile. The owl-eyed priest would approve. You drift back into the plaza with a curious question tugging at you: what kind of city feels more like a stage than a settlement? Monte Albán wasn't built to contain chaos. It was crafted to create stillness. A city to be seen, not lived. You stop in the center of the Grand Plaza and slowly turn in a full circle. Every line converges toward symmetry. Every platform seems less like a building and more like a visual sentence. And you're the lone punctuation mark moving quietly through the geometry. Historians still debate whether Monte Albán ever functioned as a proper urban center. There are no visible sewage systems, no kitchens, no burial clusters that might suggest extended family homes. The few burials that have been found are mostly elite, and even those are tucked away in sealed-off areas, not clustered into neighborhoods. What if the entire summit was a performative landscape? One that didn't house people, but hosted rituals, spectacles, statements of power. You pause beside a rectangular platform, known by its excavation label. Only no poetic name, no grand myth attached. Just a long, flat surface where something clearly happened. What exactly remains a mystery? Some believe it was used for council meetings or elite gatherings. Others think it was a theater dais. You picture nobles standing here in full regalia, obsidian mirrors strapped to their chests, cotton robes painted with stylized fire. Their shadows long in the late sun, their voices echoing through the plaza as peasants looked on from below or from nowhere at all. One fringe theory proposes that Monte Albán was never populated in the conventional sense, but served as a massive monument to centralized ideology, a city designed as a statement, not just political power, but cosmic order, a simulation of society rather than a functioning one. It sounds wild until you look around again. There's something uncanny in how preserved the site is, not just physically, but spiritually. There's no rubble of 1,000 cook fires, no tangle of residential improvisation, just clean lines, measured steps, and architectural control. You walk toward the western ridge and sit on a low wall. The valley stretches beneath you, peppered with modern houses, fields, and the winding thread of a highway. From up here, they look almost accidental. Monte Albán, in contrast, feels intentional to the core. Even its abandonment seems deliberate. Scholars estimate that around 800 CE, the Zapotec elite gradually withdrew from the site, not with war or fire, but with silence. The population dwindled, ceremonies ceased, the stage went dark, and no one else came to take it over. The Mixtec later reused some tombs, but never reclaimed the full city. It's as if the city was meant to vanish, or at least to return to quiet. You find a small platform at the edge of the site and lie down. The stone is cool beneath you. The sky above begins to shift toward amber. You hear nothing but the breeze and your own breath. Monte Albán doesn't offer answers. It offers presence. A place where people once shaped stone to mirror belief and then let it go. And in that letting go, they left something more enduring than a bustling metropolis. They left a puzzle in plain sight, a city that demands to be walked slowly, seen fully, and understood just barely. You're drawn toward the northern ridge, where a row of stone figures stands partially buried in earth and lichen. These aren't warriors, priests, or kings, not exactly. There's something stranger. You crouch beside one and study its face. It has a broad, flattened nose, almost snout-like. The lips are thick, the eyes almond-shaped and expressionless. And the ears, they curl outward, exaggerated. This figure doesn't smile, frown, or shout. It simply is, still and stern. These are often called the stone-nosed gods. Some think they represent deities. Others believe they were ancestral spirits, or even stylized captives. A few even suggest they depict a merging of human and animal forms, something sacred transformative. Their features repeat in a rhythm not identical, but eerily similar, like a chorus in stone. You run your hand along one face. The stone is cold rough and worn smooth at the highest points, nose, brow, chin. Someone touched this often. Someone stood here, perhaps every morning, to pay respects, leave offerings, or whisper prayers. The row continues, partially obscured by low vegetation. You step carefully, noting that some figures lean ever so slightly. Time has been gentle, but persistent. One figure lies face down in the grass. Another has lost its nose completely. Still, they maintain their line, watching something invisible. One of the oddest among them has 3 eyes, or at least 3 carved sockets where eyes should be. Its mouth curls in a faint smirk, or maybe that's just erosion. You stare longer than intended. It stares back. Historians still argue over their purpose. Were these statues meant to embody gods and ceremonies? Were they guardians of specific ritual zones? Or were they markers, part of some unknown calendrical or astronomical system? A more fringe idea. These weren't static idols, but characters in a now lost ritual drama. Perhaps priests donned masks that matched the stone visages. Perhaps each figure had a story told only through movement, chant, and light. You rise and back away. As a group, they resemble a stone audience watching the stage of the plaza, or maybe watching you. Nearby, a low bench carved directly into the ground faces the row, a place to sit and contemplate, a place to recite. You take a seat, adjusting your posture until it mirrors the nearest statue. Hands on knees, spine upright, eyes forward. You try to match its stillness. A fly buzzes past your ear, breaks the spell. You smile, shift stand. Further along the ridge, another platform juts out over a slope. Beneath it lies a pit, possibly once a tomb, though long since excavated. Its walls are etched with more of those inscrutable symbols, spiral stick figures, jagged lines that might be mountains or teeth. One carving catches your attention. It depicts a being with large flared nostrils, a square torso, and lines emerging from its head like rays or antennae. It holds something, perhaps a heart, perhaps a fire. Around it, smaller figures bow or fall. You take a step back. The carving looks ceremonial, apocalyptic even. Some believe it represents a divine ancestor. Others think it's a depiction of creation or judgment. The Zapotec worldview, as far as we can glean, was cyclical layered, filled with transitions between worlds. This figure may be a gatekeeper. As the light shifts, the shadows of the statues stretch across the stones like fingers. You realize the sun now sits perfectly aligned with the row. At this hour, perhaps by design, their silhouettes become long, sharp lines, like sundial arms pointing to the plaza below. Stone gods that still mark time. You exhale quietly and walk back toward the central plaza. The row of faces lingers behind you, half lit and half shadowed, watching without judgment, without need. You wander toward one of Monte Albán's more curious features, the ball courts. There are a few here less grand than those of other Mesoamerican cities, but unmistakably shaped for the sacred game. Sloped sides, narrow alleys, echoes, waiting to be awakened. You step onto the main court. Its stone floor is smoother than you'd expect given its age. The side walls angle inward, forming a shallow V. You place your palm on one and feel the chill of centuries. The ball game wasn't just sport. It was a cosmological reenactment of death rebirth celestial struggle. Historians still argue over whether Monte Albán's version followed the same rules as the Maya or Aztecs. The Zapotec version remains elusive, but the space speaks. You try to imagine players here leaping, twisting, using only hips or forearms to strike a heavy rubber ball through a vertical ring or toward a goal we can no longer identify. Were they elite athletes, prisoners, priests? A legend persists, though evidence is scarce, that the losing team, or perhaps just its captain, might be sacrificed. Some scholars say this was honor, not punishment, a gift to the gods. Others say it's an exaggeration born from misunderstanding. The truth, as always, sits in a gray zone. You pace the length of the court, trying to feel the rhythm. Two stone rings once flanked the sides, though now only mounts remain. Above them, crumbled platforms may have held spectators or judges, or priests who never cheered, only watched. At the far end, you stop where the wall curves gently inward. A small depression suggests a marker once sat here, or maybe a ceremonial fire pit. You kneel, press your ear to the stone. Nothing, just wind and the occasional chirp. You rise and glance to the side, where faint carvings line the court's frame. One shows a man in mid-leap, arms out, legs twisted. Another shows a spiral emerging from a figure's mouth, breath, speech, soul. Near the base of the wall, a less discussed carving, a player seemingly kneeling, hands to the ground. But his posture is ambiguous. Is he bowing, collapsing, offering something to the earth? One theory suggests this court wasn't for regular play at all, but for initiation rituals or high-stakes ceremonial matches held only on solstice days. Maybe the game was symbolic. Maybe it was a drama, a metaphor enacted for the gods. No scorecards, no crowds, just performance and sacrifice. You sit on one of the side steps, the kind a modern stadium would call a bleacher. The view is narrow, focused entirely on the court. No scenery, no distractions, like being inside a stone throat. And now, you notice something strange. The acoustics. A whisper carries. A shuffle echoes. The design amplifies sound. Perhaps the game wasn't meant to be seen but heard. Suddenly you picture it, the slap of rubber against stone, the grunt of exertion, the rhythmic calls of a priest marking time, and then a silence, a pause, a decision. There's a quiet intensity here that lingers. No crowds left trash. No vendors hawked snacks, just footsteps, many of them now gone. The game has long since ended, but the court remembers. You rise, stepping back into the fading light. Behind you, the shadows of the ball court walls lean in as if still expecting another match. You meander along a terraced path, leading to the outer edge of the site where fewer tourists go and the wind picks up speed. This high ridge offers a sweeping view of the valley below. Verdant patches, scattered villages, and a ribbon of road slashing across the landscape like a scar. You settle on a stone bench, carved smooth and warm from the afternoon sun. You take a sip from your water bottle, imaginary or not. It tastes faintly of pulque, fermented agave, sharp, slightly sweet. Something ancient people might have sipped while contemplating this same view. You ask yourself again, why build here? Monte Albán isn't near a major water source. It's not on fertile soil. Its elevation makes it hard to reach and harder still to farm. And yet for over 1,000 years, it thrived as a capital ritual center and beacon of Zapotec civilization. One common theory is strategic visibility. From this summit, you can see almost every neighboring valley. It's a 360-degree throne, a statement of control. If you were a rival approaching from below, Monte Albán would loom silent and confident. Another idea, symbolic elevation. High places have long carried sacred meaning. Mountains touch the heavens. Gods live in the clouds. Building a city here wasn't just practical, it was theological. A way to rise above the mundane, to be closer to the divine. You glance over your shoulder at the stone structures behind you. Even from here, their geometry holds. The alignments, the angles. You half expect a hidden door to open if you breathe just right. Some scholars propose that the site began as a neutral zone, a meeting point between warring chiefdoms in the region. A kind of ritual Switzerland where power could be negotiated and calendars shared. Over time, it grew from neutral hilltop to cultural nucleus. And maybe, just maybe, the very difficulty of building here was the point. It wasn't convenient, but it was impressive. The kind of place that says, we have the resources and vision to bend mountains. You look down again. The valley floor seems almost too far away now. You can't hear the traffic, can't smell the kitchens, can't feel the heartbeat of modern life. Up here, it's just stone and sky, and that wind constant, unrelenting. You wrap your arms around yourself. Imagine the ancient builders hauling stones, laying foundations, all while battered by this same current. Not for comfort, for statement. You rise and follow the terrace's edge, where wild grass creeps between cracked paving stones. A small stone marker juts up, unlabeled, unnoticed. But you pause anyway. It faces east. Maybe a grave, maybe a marker for the sun's first light. Maybe both. you can't help but smile at the ambiguity. Monte Albán's charm lies in that refusal to explain itself. It offers just enough a pattern, a shadow, a story half told. And as the sun dips lower, bathing the hills in amber, you feel what the ancients must have felt. Not convenience, not luxury, but purpose. They built here to be seen, to rise, to last. You return to the heart of Monte Albán with a new idea taking shape in your mind. What if this mountaintop marvel was never meant to be a city at all? Not in the residential sense anyway. There's a growing school of thought among archaeologists, the hollow heart theory. It proposes that Monte Albán was a symbol of power, not a center of population. A stage-set capital inhabited not by bustling crowds, but by ceremony, presence, and image. Political theater with more actors than audience. You walk the central plaza again. This time, you imagine it empty by design. The platforms become podiums, the pyramids perches, the temples backdrops. You, a lowly emissary from a valley town looking up at cloaked figures on the ridge, reciting edicts or myths into the wind. Historians still debate this concept fiercely. Some argue the elite lived here year-round, simply in ways we haven't detected. Others believe the residences were temporary or ceremonial palaces that functioned only during specific festivals or governing seasons. There's little evidence of daily domestic life. No kitchens, no workshops, no midden heaps. Instead, what Monte Albán does have is symmetry, alignment, acoustics, and drama. You cross into a smaller, recessed courtyard, part of what might have been a palace or elite compound. The walls are unusually tall here, blocking the wind. There's a sense of privacy or exclusivity, a place not for public ritual, but for negotiation. A cracked lintel still bears glyphs, stylized footprints, intertwined lines, perhaps referencing a lineage or alliance. You touch the carving and imagine two leaders standing here speaking softly, watched only by stone. Back outside, the breeze returns. You climb a stepped platform with no apparent purpose. No building on top. No sign of function. Just space. You stand there, look down at the plaza below, and realize how much is visible, how easily you could be seen by everyone. A platform made not for dwelling, but for being seen. You begin to notice more platforms like it. One to the east aligned with sunrise, another to the south, casting a dramatic afternoon shadow. The city is full of these viewing spots, speaking platforms, processional paths. And if the hollow heart theory holds, these weren't leftovers of a residential city. They were the city. A giant stone performance space. One fringe interpretation even suggests Monte Albán wasn't a capital in the typical sense, but a site of convergence. A place for regional leaders to meet seasonally, perform their roles, reaffirm cosmic order, and then return home to govern. Like a stage where characters step into myth, then step back into life. You remember the danzantes, the dancers carved in stone. Were they captives, ancestors, or performers in this ritual world? Monte Albán begins to feel more like a metaphor than a metropolis. Its heart wasn't hollow from neglect. It was intentionally cleared. Like a courtyard swept clean before a play begins. As you descend from the platform, The sun catches the edge of a stair, casting a shadow shaped like a blade. You pause. The imagery isn't lost on you. Power here wasn't just shown, it was performed. And maybe as you walk these silent stones, you too are playing a part. The latest in a long line of visitors, drawn not by answers, but by the sheer force of architectural suggestion. You're back in the Grand Plaza, standing in the open, when it finally hits you, the total absence of clutter. No broken ceramics scattered underfoot. No traces of latrines. No ash pits from kitchen fires. It's not just tidy, it's empty. As if someone pressed a reset button on history. You walk slowly, scanning the ground, searching for the forgotten messes of civilization. But there's nothing. Not even faint dark patches where organic material once decayed. And that's odd. Cities, even ceremonial ones, tend to generate waste. Life is messy. But Monte Albán's summit feels vacuum sealed. A place built to appear ancient, but untouched, as though no one really lived here long enough to make a mess. One theory suggests that inhabitants removed trash and waste off the mountaintop regularly, perhaps as a form of ritual purification. But even that seems like an extraordinary effort for a city of this scale. The logistics boggle the mind. You find yourself drifting toward a structure you haven't noticed before. It's low, almost sunken. Inside, nothing. No soot stains, no floor wear, no discoloration. Just smooth stone and sunlight. Historians still argue whether these rooms ever served domestic functions. There's simply no material culture left behind. No bowls, no tools, no scraps. Either the Zapotec elite lived here with exceptional cleanliness, or, and more likely, this wasn't where they lived at all. It's a museum before museums existed. Even the staircases lack wear grooves deep enough to suggest daily traffic. You run your hand along one step's edge, crisp, intact, as if it had been climbed only occasionally on holidays by sandal-wearing priests. You sit in the shade of a tall pillar and let your gaze drift. The city's curated emptiness becomes a kind of echo. Not just a lack of things, but a deliberate message. A place meant to suggest permanence through absence, presence through vacancy. One quirky interpretation, you read once that Monte Albán was like a theater set, left standing after the show ended. The actors gone, the audience dispersed, the props cleared, but the stage, still perfect, still waiting. You walk back toward Building J, again the diagonal one. Even here, the supposed observatory, no debris, no discarded offerings, no signs of occupation, just stone and geometry. If something happened here, it was momentary, rare, and pristine. And that's what gets you. The whole site feels like a performance that repeated just enough to leave a structure, but not enough to leave stains. You pass a carved stela near the plaza's center. It's taller than you worn by rain, but still legible in places. The figure on it is mid-motion, cloaked arms out, mouth open in eternal oration. Around its base, nothing. No flowers, no offerings, just wind and dust. Was this person ever real? Were they immortalized for governance or mythology? Another theory emerges that Monte Albán itself was the monument. The city wasn't built to honor people, it was the honor. A platform from which authority, divinity, and civilization radiated outward. You stand in the center of the plaza again, arms loose at your sides, eyes closed. The wind rustles the valley trees below. A bird caws overhead. The stone beneath your feet hasn't shifted in 2,000 years, but everything else has. Monte Albán was never meant to bustle. It was meant to be. You return to the very beginning, your first steps onto the plaza under the hush of twilight. But now, you carry the full weight of everything you've seen. The steps that whispered, the carvings that almost spoke, the layouts that refused convenience, and the silence. It no longer feels empty. It feels intentional. You wander slowly along the plaza's edge, dragging your fingertips across the stone. The city is not resisting your presence. It's absorbing it, turning you into one more shadow moving through its designed emptiness. Historians still debate whether Monte Albán was ever truly alive in the conventional sense, whether thousands lived and loved here, whether children played among the platforms, or if they were warned to stay away, whether laughter once echoed off these walls, or only chance. But the pattern holds everything here is too symmetrical, too curated, too sacred to be accidental. You find a narrow path that winds between two long-forgotten buildings. It leads not to another temple or stage, but to a small ledge overlooking the valley. A quiet corner, no carvings, no glyphs, just wind and the sound of distant rustling. You sit, your body relaxed now, your limbs heavy. Below you, lights twinkle in modern Oaxaca. Cars move, people laugh, radios play. A dog barks at something unseen. Up here, none of that matters. One last fact floats into your mind after Monte Albán was abandoned around 800 CE. The valley didn't collapse. Other cities rose. The Zapotec civilization continued, but no one built another mountaintop marvel quite like this. As if the experiment was complete, as if the message had been sent and there was no need to repeat it. You look at your hands dusted with time. You look at your shoes worn from hours of wandering. And then you look at the stone. It breathes. Not in the way lungs do, but in the way memory does. Slowly. Inhales centuries, exhales meaning. The designs here, the empty plazas, the silent gods, the forgotten staircases, they weren't abandoned. They were left quite precisely to remain as they are. Monte Albán wasn't deserted, it was completed. And you sleepy explorer have walked its last act. So now, as night blankets the hilltop, and the stars return to their watchful posts, you let your thoughts slow. The wind wraps gently around your shoulders. The stone beneath you, though cool, holds the sun's ghost warmth. You've wandered a city built not for living, but for remembering. Not for comfort, but for precision. A city whose silence was part of its design. You've traced its lines, stepped across its altars, puzzled over its unbroken symmetry. And slowly you began to understand Monte Albán isn't trying to tell you everything. It's asking you to feel. The gods may have gone quiet. The priests may have descended the mountain one last time. But the shapes they left remain. Angular poetry in limestone. geometry as prayer. Let your breath match the stillness. Let your body rest. Let your mind uncoil from questions and simply drift with the wind, just as this mountaintop has done for 1,000 years. You are safe here. The stone remembers you. The city was always waiting for one more visitor, one more silent witness to close the loop. So, ease your shoulders, soften your gaze. The wind will finish the story from here,